Thank you to everybody who is able to attend today. This is Harry Pasquarella from Harbor Research, and we'll be talking about healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality, and talking a little bit about the collaboration between Harbor Research and CABA, the topic itself, as well as an upcoming research project on the topic as well. I'll provide a quick overview of who Harbor Research is before we get into the topic area. Harbor Research is a research and strategy consulting firm focused on emerging technologies, IoT, and smart systems. We've been around since the 1980s and are based in Denver, Colorado, with an office in Berlin as well. And we've done a lot of work with both equipment suppliers and service providers for equipment, as well as technology developers and suppliers as well. I am hearing some feedback. If those who aren't speaking could mute, that would be great. And hopefully you all can hear me okay anyway. Thank you. We have a long history working with building suppliers. We've seen this market evolve over the past 20 plus years in all kind of major areas within buildings, energy services, HVAC, building controls, power, and newer software and services. All of this has given us a unique perspective on how the market for buildings, technologies, and solutions is evolving, and how and why we're even having this conversation about healthy buildings at this point. We've also done a lot of work with CABA over the years, most recently looking at AI and predictive maintenance for intelligent buildings, as well as energy management systems for intelligent buildings. And so again, this long history lends itself to kind of really seeing this market evolve, understanding customer needs and the landscape, and really just how different segments are interacting, how different suppliers are interacting, how different customers are interacting, help solve some of the biggest problems within intelligent buildings and various types of buildings. So as I said, CABA and Harbor Research are collaborating on the 2022 landmark research project, Healthy Buildings and Indoor Environmental Quality. This has become quite an important topic, particularly over the last few years, because of the pandemic and all of the issues that the pandemic has caused. That said, this is a topic that has been studied and worked on for many years before that. And anybody who's involved in the in HVAC or lighting or other sorts of building systems knows that happy, healthy people in those buildings results in better outcomes for the owners and operators and users of those buildings. And so while some might not always think about it as such, because we spend so much of our time indoors, because up until this pandemic, most of us went to work every day in an office building or a hospital or a data center or an industrial manufacturing facility. These buildings, how they're designed, how they're developed, how these systems interact together, all sum up to the health and the safety of the people within them, and therefore also the ability of businesses to function within them as well. So where are we? I actually developed this slide back in 2020, if you can believe it. I'm sure we all, very optimistic at that time that this pandemic wouldn't extend much beyond the summer of 2020. And here we are in 2022 and continuing to hear about all of this. I know a lot of people, including myself, aren't even back into an office full time, but there are many that are. But regardless, we're still faced with this specter of the pandemic, and not just the COVID-19 pandemic that we've all been going through for the past few years, but obviously it's opened our eyes to the future of these events as well, and that while no one can absolutely predict when or how or why any of this will happen, it's become clear that this will likely not be the last pandemic that we'll face. And so when we were thinking about and studying the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and institutions back in 2020, we really kind of identified 3 areas where kind of investment could be made to help support a faster, more predictable kind of recovery from all of this. And those 3 areas are policy, process, and technology. And we'll talk about all 3 today, but I think it's important to understand that not just one of these, or even in a lot of cases, the combination of 2 of these 3 things isn't necessarily going to get us to the point where everything's back to normal. It really is a combination of policy, process, and technology that will help drive a better, more predictable responses and recovery from these types of events moving forward. And if anything, while healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality has been a topic for a while, the pandemic really highlighted the need for additional policies, processes, and technologies to help support healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality. So what qualifies as a healthy building? There's a lot of good research out there. This portrayal and a couple others in here have been grabbed and updated from Joseph Allen and John McComber out of Harvard. But there's many different aspects, systems, processes, whatever you would call them, that go into what makes a healthy building. And there's many indicators, both lagging and leading, of if buildings are healthy or if buildings are promoting safety and health for the people within them. So obviously some lagging indicators. So the total amount of sick days, the medical costs, the other sorts of health and symptoms that people are experiencing that are living or working within these buildings. These are all the things that point to that these buildings might not be set up in the healthiest way, or the indoor environmental quality might not be the best. Some of the leading indicators, though, there's obviously a lot of real-time feedback that occurs, but more could be done here around employee happiness or complaints about certain things, whether that be complaints about restrooms being dirty, complaints about the heating or the AC in some cases, complaints about lack of lighting. All of this stuff can be leading indicators of a building health or the healthiness of a built environment. Many indirect aspects as well, everything from planning that goes into things like safety and security, how the building is actually designed to promote natural light, to promote other sorts of features, whether that be plants or water features or whatever that might be. Obviously there can be a bunch of sensors around things like water quality and moisture and so on. All of this is kind of adding up to how we can start to classify and understand what healthy buildings are and what indoor environmental quality can be, and how do we actually measure those impacts. When we look at it from a system standpoint, we see kind of 5 main areas that feed 10 different systems within a building, or 10 different areas within a building that relate to kind of healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality. So there's occupant health and wellness, there's safety and security health, there's resource health and sustainability and stability, process and operations health, and system health. And so all of these feed these 10 areas, these 10 kind of foundational features that enable healthier indoor environments. On the right, But as you can see, this is everything from how HVAC systems functions to produce clean air, how different kind of life safety systems are set up, fire safety, security, that kind of thing. How much kind of renewable energy is used, or how resources are managed within a building context, all of the processes around workflows that occur within that building, everywhere from how say a building cafeteria may be set up and run, how janitorial staff works, how security at the front desk works. All of this can combine into a healthy building. And so these 10 areas really are kind of where we'll be focusing our attention as we get into our research, and try to understand both what is out there today, what types of solutions and technologies and systems are out there supporting healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality today, as well as how customers, both kind of tenants as well as owners and operators, perceive the value of any of these types of solutions and systems, and where the priorities might lie, whether you're in an office building, a healthcare environment, or some other sort of built environment. As we were saying before, if the response to the pandemic is really needs to be kind of a combination of policy, process, and technology, all of these kind of 10 areas that might support healthy buildings can also be thought of in the same way. So I'm sure all of you have experienced a lot of mask orders and other sorts of protective gear requirements. That is a kind of a sort of a policy or a process area that people might decide. And so if you're doing that, obviously it's a way to protect people within a built environment. It has relatively low a business impact, but doesn't really deal with the heart of the problem. On the other end of the spectrum, you have elimination of exposure, which is results from instituting things like work from home policies. So if nobody's going into the office or the facility in which they work, then there's no chance for them to see adverse health effects from that building itself. Again, in this case, it's pretty effective because people don't have even an opportunity to get sick or ill from their environment, or feel productivity issues from their environment. But it obviously has a pretty significant business impact. I think we've all felt that. And so these are examples of kind of policy or process responses to the pandemic. In the middle there, you'll see kind of engineering controls in spaces. And this is acknowledging that in a lot of these cases, the ways that buildings are designed, the ways that physical systems operate, technologies that can support those physical systems to be the best that they can be, or to notify us that air filters need changing, or to adjust lights automatically based on the daylight that's coming in, whatever that might be. There's a whole area of kind of engineering, control, automation, new technology that can help support an effective response that is likewise effective and less of a business impact, still allows people to be in buildings and working within buildings and hopefully feeling safe and healthy within those environments as well. And so again, it's not like this is a silver bullet per se. But it's definitely an area that deserves some thought and attention, and can be combined with some of these other areas, other policies and processes to help drive impact. Of course, varying impacts will come from all of this. These are all just examples of those impacts. But there's extensive research on areas like how HVAC systems or how lighting impacts people's productivity. As you'll see, kind of there's in a few cases here on the top left, 101% increase in cognitive scores for workers in green and well-ventilated offices. 46 minutes more sleep for workers in offices near windows. While some of this might be maybe indirect in terms of its impact on how productive people are in the office, or how a business ends up functioning, we can all see that and I'm sure all understand that healthier people will be more productive and will drive better business outcomes. And so that's what all of this is aiming at. A couple of other areas here. So there's, all the way on the right, and the noise and acoustics, 66% fall in staff performance as a result of distracting noise. There's all of these different areas where if businesses are set up and if systems are set up within buildings to support worker environments, there's a lot of opportunity for new health and impact in business environments moving forward. And at the same time, so because of all of this technology, and I'm sure a lot of us have seen new things come up, whether that be things like contactless payments, whether that be different sorts of security mechanisms getting into buildings. Obviously, we're all sitting on Zoom right now, virtual meetings and e-learning and virtual whiteboards. All these kind of new use cases can be supported by new technologies in this new normal to help drive some better outcomes as well. And so at the intersection of kind of policy, process, and technology necessarily is intelligent buildings. And these spaces will necessarily be configured as well to the work that's going on there. So an office building and the use cases of new technologies to support a healthy built environment or indoor environmental quality will be or may be different from a healthcare setting or a manufacturing setting or another setting within buildings. And it's definitely important to understand these use cases and the technologies that support them, but understand also that they will be applied in many different ways across the economy. So that I'm going to shift gears a little bit just to talk about some of this upcoming research that we'll be doing, and then we'll leave a good amount of time for questions, and if happy to kind of flip back to any of these slides as needed here. So as we look to research this opportunity further, really what we're trying to understand is, given the increased focus on healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality, and all of the potential opportunities that focus rises, how do we understand which opportunities are most attractive? Which technologies, which use cases, which systems are customers really looking for? How might they prioritize, and how suppliers and customers can collaborate to help drive better outcomes, healthier buildings, and better indoor environmental quality. So within that context, we'll be looking at various trends and forces supporting these the healthy building ecosystem. We're looking at customer needs, adoption, and buying behavior, supplier dynamics and best practices, as well as future considerations and how all of this will continue to evolve. As a part of this, we'll be trying to, as I said, kind of determine where are all the opportunities, where are all the use cases, who's doing what today, what's being adopted, and so on, and use that, analyze those inputs to help understand how different organizations and suppliers can best support end customers and the built environment, and becoming healthier, safer, and higher quality. As part of this research, we'll be doing an extensive survey and a set of in-depth interviews to gain an understanding of the current state, as well as future-looking trends and how solutions are evolving to support customers. The survey itself will focus on end customers or people within buildings or managing buildings or building buildings to support kind of healthier buildings and indoor environmental quality, to understand any trends around current adoption there, as well as needs and requirements and priorities moving forward. In-depth interviews will be focused on understanding companies and organizations that are supporting healthy buildings already today. What solutions they are providing, what else they see out there in the marketplace that can help promote healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality, as well as even in some cases where it makes sense, trying to understand from a customer perspective as well, kind of all of the different systems and technologies that they've used to support healthier buildings. All of this will help drive an analysis that will result in a long report that covers all of these different topics that we reviewed throughout this presentation. A little bit more input on the market feedback aspects, because these are so important and critical to understanding kind of the current state of the market. But again, we'll be looking at end customers and stakeholders, so intelligent building tenants and occupants, leasing or management companies, co-working building spaces, other sorts of owners, operators, and developers, to really kind of get a sense for which technologies they're adopting today, what they're looking for from suppliers, and how this most recent pandemic has maybe influenced their investment decisions related to new sorts of technologies or systems or concerns even in these environments. And on the supplier and expert interview side, industry thought leaders, service providers, technology players, and equipment manufacturers can all speak to current solutions and future plans for solutions to help support healthier buildings. As part of the deliverables from this study, we'll be looking at organizing the steering committee to help support new or collaboration around the actual research design itself. We'll be conducting those surveys and interviews, as I mentioned, and providing all of the data from the surveys and interviews, both in raw data formats as well as in summarized outputs, all culminating into a report of typically about 100 pages or so that details all of the trends and forces, the customer needs and environments, the supplier landscape, and future opportunities for companies trying to participate in the market. Also, as if for the funders of the study, we'll also be organizing final kind of readouts and webinars and so on. And we also do a think tank interaction at the end, where steering committee members and members of the general public are able to come together and discuss the findings. So with that, I will hand it over to Greg for any other words, any other comments here. And I am also happy to take other questions as well as related to the topic or the information that we covered.
Hi, Harry. Thanks so much for that. Actually, Greg unfortunately wasn't able to make it, but I'll take over just until we go through our question and answer period. So my name is Marta, and I'm the the manager of programs and communications at CABA. And thank you, Harry, for your take on healthy buildings and IEQ. And so as Harry did mention, we will be collaborating with Harbor Research and many of our funders on this project. We currently have 9 funders for the project, and we are always looking for more. And really, this is just a collaborative effort for funding in terms of different levels. We have our titanium funder level, our bronze, silver, and gold being our highest level. So if you are interested in joining and participating in being a steering committee member for this project, we certainly welcome you to reach out to CABA. You can actually go to caba.org, and under our research and information, you can look to our collaborative research section where we have our landmark research projects listed, and healthy buildings and IEQ, indoor environmental quality, being one of those. On there, you'll actually be able to read the prospectus and as well as look at or read through the purpose of the research and the scope and essentially what topics will be covered on the research itself. And also as well, we include our contact information if you are interested in learning more about the project, if you're looking to learn to be a funder as well. With that, I will pass it back on to Harry, I should say, for any questions that anyone may have. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like, and we can go through any questions, or if you have any comments as well, please feel free to speak. You can also write your questions on the Q&A, which I believe we have someone who may have already submitted a question, as well as the chat as well. So Harry, I think there is a question on the Q&A, and that is this only targeted at office buildings, or will this cover K-12, government, educational, healthcare, etc.?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We're going to try and cover as many segments as we can. All of those segments that you've listed there will definitely be included. As we found in previous studies, needs and approaches and priorities are quite different when you're looking at these different building segments. And so we'll be doing the same here in this study as well. Other areas, or at least other areas that aren't in that list would be other sorts of mission critical environments, things like industrial manufacturing facilities and data centers and so on. We also do like to look at things like transportation venues, so like airports and train stations and bus stations, as well as other sorts of entertainment venues as well. So entertainment and hospitality, I should say. So everything from hotels to convention centers to sports stadiums and casinos and so on. All of these will have different requirements, and we'll be digging into and trying to understand those requirements as it relates to healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality.
Excellent. We have another question from Donald Delicat. Do you have any references for this topic?
So assuming you mean kind of different or additional areas to go find information, is that, if that's the question, I would just say both the EPA and Harvard Business School, the Harvard Chan School of Public Health that we were referring to from this page, they have a lot of good information and context for this this topic. Both have produced pretty seminal reports in the area related to different strategies for promoting healthy buildings. So this would be where we would end up pulling kind of a lot of our secondary research from, as well as other external sources, in addition to all of that primary research that we had mentioned. And so, yeah, I hope I'm answering your question. If there's a different kind of context or a different objective with that question, please feel free to ask.
Excellent. Yes, Donald, if there is a follow-up, please let us know if there's a follow-up to that question. If there is anyone else who'd like to participate in Q&A, please feel free to unmute and proceed.
Hi, this is David. I just joined late, sorry.
Hi, David. Yes, please go ahead.
But I'm involved with the healthy building issue. And so I was just wondering when, how are we addressing the energy trade-off versus the increased air, air quality, air exchange, thicker filters? Is that going to be like
Sure.
this?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's an interesting trade-off. And definitely not, I mean, in that case, it's a relatively unique to this situation, but not unique to kind of the intelligent buildings problems that we've tried to analyze and research over the past few years. I think it's definitely important to understand kind of willingness to pay for healthier buildings and indoor environmental quality. And so while we're not necessarily going to be going into a very in-depth kind of willingness to pay study here, just because of the breadth of topics that we need to cover, we will always ask in these surveys kind of the willingness to pay for various solutions, or what impact people hope to achieve from various solutions, and what trade-offs they are willing to make. And so that kind of thing can definitely be covered. I think because HVAC and air filtration and air quality as a whole is such an important topic, I can see us asking pretty directly about, would you be willing to pay more in energy costs to get the benefit of better indoor air quality? I think it's also worth looking at solutions beyond just increasing the size of filters that could help improve or at least analyze indoor environmental quality and air quality, and help inform different actions that can be taken or different systems that should be implemented that may not impact energy costs as much. I think both of those kinds of approaches to that question are worth asking, or sorry, worth addressing in the context of this research. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, thank you. Because we had to this exact group a presentation by one of those providers that does do indoor air quality and literally pays for it with the energy savings because of the way they approach it holistically. And then we have smart air filters that are going into federal buildings now that are better than MERV 13 and don't use more energy, but people don't know about them because we didn't address it. So hopefully this will expose that, and maybe we'll get some of those to sponsor the research. Thanks.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as always, as part of this research, we like to talk to those folks that are supplying solutions that solve some of these problems in innovative ways that people might not know about. And we tend to highlight a lot of those types of solutions in this kind of report. And so it's an interesting problem. And I'm assuming in some cases, while companies or institutions might be willing to pay more in some cases to have healthier buildings, it's not necessarily like everybody already magically has more budget to spend on healthier buildings technologies, or that they can always create new budget lines for these kinds of investments. So figuring out ways to do this within typical budgets, or even in some cases, hopefully saving money and directly measuring those impacts, I think is quite important. It looks
I think
like
we have a hand up. Brian Vaughn, I believe, may have a question. Brian?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it's perfect timing based on like what David was asking and where I was wanting to go with my question is, will there be a view into the alternative methods for mitigating air quality issues? Like currently, basically the only answer is to ventilate. But based on like David's point around alternative, like different ways of mitigating the air quality, like there's energy savings associated to it as well. So, like basic, like the challenges, however, there's a lot of technologies, bipolar, UV, active charcoal, and you name it, right? There's a ton of them. Are those going to be addressed on a technology basis to identify like pros, cons, like what works, what doesn't work? things
Yeah.
that are.
Yeah, definitely. So those 10 areas that we were looking at in the presentation are kind of our starting point for understanding kind of all of the different impact areas, or all of the different areas where you might be able to impact healthier buildings and indoor environmental quality. And for each of those, we'll want to look at the different potential solutions that can help improve health or environmental quality relative to those systems, and the different trade-offs between them. And so, because I'm sure that you could spend a whole project focused on specifically HVAC and air quality, and so we have to be a little bit careful. We're not going to be able to go very in depth into that particular area at the expense of other areas per se, but we understand that that is a critical system in this context, and it will be given its due, and we'll be really trying to understand both the different potential solutions as well as the related trade-offs there, and doing so in a pretty objective way. Thank you, Brian. I'm seeing a couple other questions come up in Q&A. So, what federal funds are still available for facility studies and upgrades? I think that's something that we'll want to look into. There's still, as far as I understand it, from a lot of the bills that have been passed over the past few years, that can help, or that contain funding that could help support some of this investment. I think that there's still funding available. I think one of the key questions that we'll be answering in the context of the US and Canada is what exact federal funds might be available, whether that be grants or otherwise, or rebates or otherwise, to help support investment in these types of technologies and systems. And so that'll definitely be a question that we want to answer through this study. Cool. Another question from Derek is, it is important to consider how areas distributed. Oh, okay. Yep, I agree with that. I think when we look at kind of some of the novel solutions in the building environment that provide a greater insight into things like how air is being distributed, just different temperatures in different areas of buildings, I don't know if how many people are familiar with it, but say, basically digital twin of the built environment can be very helpful here. And I think if there's potentially different areas that are more important or less important to help drive this, these types of solutions, that's what we'll want to get out of some of these, especially expert and supplier interviews, people who are working in these areas who actually understand both the solution landscape as well as the impact of various solutions as well. Great. Other questions that I can help answer?
I'm going to ask you about healthy buildings, but we see that now the people in the building, and this goes to well and fit well. I think that's all part of that having healthy buildings, whether it's schools that only have certain healthy foods and gyms. So are you going to broaden that healthy building look at what do we put in our buildings that improve the health of the occupants? Yes,
yeah, for sure. So I want to be careful. So obviously we're not going to develop a report on school nutrition, but I think we want to understand the different things that can be incorporated into buildings to help support the health and safety of the individuals within those buildings. At the same time, we are a research and consulting firm focused on new technologies. The Continental Automated Buildings Association is focused on intelligent buildings. So I would, while we want to comprehend and include in the report the different things that can help support these healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality, there will be a significant portion of it devoted to new technologies that can help support all of this as well. So we can't really have one without the other. We want to understand how buildings and systems can be designed to support healthier environments, and I'm sure in some cases, as we were just talking about before, relative to things like air filters, even just understanding that you don't need to necessarily connect the air filter and collect data from that air filter to improve it. There's different air filtration technologies that can be implemented to support better indoor air quality. And so we're taking a holistic view, but a lot of these opportunities will focus in on where we do have physical systems, where we do have people and processes interacting. You know, what can be done to help improve those, and how can technology support them as well. Okay, and then I see another a question from David here. What about the Clean Air in Building Challenge? I think, yes, we'll be looking at these various programs for sure, the various regulatory bodies and the funds that are available. That's a good one. We'll definitely look into that and make sure that we're including kind of an overview of that in the report. I think a lot of the funding discussion has been dominated by a lot of the recent bills and things that have been passed, particularly in the U.S. to support infrastructure funding and COVID response. But I think there's definitely others out there that we'll be looking into. Good. I see another question from Derek. Is this let's see, CO2 levels should be between 600 and 800 parts per million as it's being adopted by the US in general. I'd be interested in that. I think we would be also looking to interview potentially policymakers or standards bodies around these things. Those have always been very fruitful conversations to just understand where that regulatory environment is heading. I know, I guess we didn't explicitly say it in the presentation itself, but this report is focused on the US and Canada in that regard as well. So we'd be hoping to get much more detail and understanding of the US and Canadian regulatory policy landscape relative to healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality through this work as well.
And with that, Harry, I think we can close off the Q&A. If there's anything you'd like to close off with.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, Marta, I'll leave it up to you, but I'm assuming these slides will get sent around to folks. So our contact information is in there. Marta's contact information, I believe, is in there. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out. As Marta said, you can head on over to CABA.org to check out the research perspectives if you're interested, or reach out to any of us and we can connect you and hopefully get you all part of the study. In addition, if you do want to have a conversation with us just as part of our research, we'd always be happy to have conversations with people who are working in the space. Again, my email is in this document. I'll just flash it up real quick. We'd be happy to speak and discuss the topic.
Thanks so much, Harry. Thank you so much, Harry. Appreciate you taking the time to go through this. So again, if you are interested in learning more about this, CABA.org, and we will be posting this presentation on the website under our research and information section, specifically under the Healthy Buildings and Indoor Environmental Quality project. So if there is anything that you'd like to take from those slides, you can actually go to that. And again, thank you to everyone who attended, and we will hopefully see you soon on future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.